Okay. Again, welcome to all. Okay. Last time I have started the interrupts. Okay. Is it visible before I start? Whether the if it is visible to all?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what we have seen last time, I just revised. Okay, and then we will go to the next one. So last time I have started the interrupt. Okay, in this interrupt we have seen why to use interrupts. Okay, because without interrupt it is not possible to execute the important task. Okay, second question we have seen that what happens whenever any hardware or software interrupt comes. Okay, so we have to switch from the whenever the interrupt comes, we have to switch from the task code to the ISR routine. We have to complete the ISR routine, and again you have to come back from ISR routine to the task code. Okay, and meanwhile you have to upload all the contents of your CPU registers, okay, onto the stack memory. So that is called as a saving the context, means pushing all the registers at the beginning of an interrupt routine is known as saving the context. What is the restoring the context? We have seen that whenever we come back from ISR to task code, you have to pop down all the contents from the stack memory, okay, into the local registers. So this process is called as a restoring the context. Then second point we have seen that the shared data problem. The shared data problem is arises due to the sharing of the common variables between the task code and the interrupt service routine. So that we have seen in a very simple language. I can say that this problem is arises due to the sharing of the resources between the task code and the interrupt service routine. And so we have seen what is the function of the task code and also the interrupt service routine. Okay. Uh, so one example or application we have discussed of the nuclear reactor monitoring system. Okay, here we have to maintain the same temperature at the bottom of the reactor as well as at the top of the reactor. So we have installed two temperature sensors, and it is we have to monitor whether the temperature of both the temperature sensor is same or not. If it is same, the nuclear reactor functions properly. If the temperatures are not same, okay, they differ from each other, then there is a problem in the nuclear reactor that we have to detect by using our RTOS code. Okay, and for this we have written the code also. Okay, again I have told that there are two types of code. One is a code written for the interrupt service routine, and another is a code written for the your task code. So basically, task code is used to complete the computational part, such as calculation, addition, subtraction, multiplication, comparison. This type of things are completed by the task code, while interrupt service routine will read the changes in the environmental parameters, and it will send these changes from the environmental parameter to the CPU. Okay, so this particular code we have seen here. Okay, and also we have seen what happen if you share the common resources like I temperature 0 and I temperature 1. These are the two array that are shared in the interrupt service routine, as well as we have shared the same thing in the in your main task code. So because of the sharing of these two resources in between task code and the ISR, we have come across the problem of shared data problem. Uh, then we have tried to remove this shared data problem by removing the local variables. Okay, but still the problem remains same, and the problem becomes more harder. That is called as a harder shared data problem. Okay, so if you observe this code, I have just removed the local variables like item 0 and item 1, and I have directly used the this array from the ISR itself. So I temperature 0 is directly compared with I temperature 1, that is two arrays are directly compared, but still you cannot come out of this loop because of the problem is that your compiler will always convert your single C statement into a number of assembly statements, and there is a problem of an harder shared data problem. So you can come over of this harder shared data problem by using some of the solutions that we have seen by enabling and disabling the functions before the use of shared data problem, sorry, before the use of your shared variables, And after the use of shared variables, you can disable, you can enable your interrupts. Also, there is a functionality to enable and disable your interrupts in your assembly language also. So this is the code which show you the how to deal with the shared data problem by just using the two functions. One is called as a disable function. Just see, here is a code disable before the use of these two shared data variables, I temperature 0 and I temperature 1. And once this is over, you can enable your interrupt. Okay, so this is a simple way to solve the shared data problem. And these two functions, disable and enables, are available in all the compilers. Most of the are mostly in the C compilers. These two functions are already available. Now, how to solve the shared data problem in your assembly language? So, whatever we have seen in the instruction set, there are two instructions called as a DI, disable interrupts, and EI is enable interrupts. So, by using these two instructions, you can disable the interrupts whenever you are going to use the shared variables, and once you have used the shared variables, you can enable your interrupt. So this is how you can come out of the shared data problem. Also, there are another concept we have seen: atomic section and critical section. So atomic section and critical section is nothing but the code or the instructions which are very critical for the success of your embedded system. So you have to safeguard these two instructions. For example, here move R1 and R2 at temperature 0 and at temperature 1. So these two instructions are very critically in terms of the successful implementation of your embedded system. So you have to save these two parameters by using DI and EI instructions. So this kinds of sections is called as atomic instructions, and the section which decides the success of your system is called as a critical section. So in terms of embedded system, these two instructions, or also this particular part that is what's shown between the disable and enable functions, this is called as a critical section of the system. That's quite simple. Another example I have shared with a timer. Okay, so right now I don't have the time. Okay, so because this is already over in the last lecture. Now in this lecture, we will go for the next point, that is called as the interrupt latency. Okay, so already I have told what is interrupt latency or what is interrupt. Okay, and what is interrupt latency that you have to see. Latency means actually the response. Okay, so how much time is required for the interrupt to respond? Okay, if some interrupt comes to your microprocessor, so how much time is required to respond to that particular interrupt? That is nothing but the interrupt latency. Okay, so in the exam also you will encounter these questions. Okay, that is what are the different parameters that will contribute to the interrupt latency. So that is very important questions. So definition of interrupt latency is given as amount of time it takes for the system to respond to an interrupt. So it's quite simple. Okay, for example, if somebody have disturbed you, okay, so how much time is needed to you people to respond to that person? Okay, because you are not going to respond instantly because you are doing something. So you will just resume that things, or you will first complete that things, and then you give the service to another person. Okay, so that is called as the interrupt latency. The same thing is applied in the microprocessor also. Whenever the interrupt comes, amount of time it takes for the system to respond is an interrupt. Okay, or called as interrupt latency. Is it fine? Uh, some members are waiting outside the class. Please give permission to other. Deshmukh, I think I have done it automatic admit. Okay, I have used automatic admit app or some add-ons. So I don't need to request me. Okay, it is automatically get added into the Google Meet. Is it fine?
Okay, sir.
Up till now, I think it is fine. Okay. Interrupt latency is very simple. That is amount of time the system required to respond to the interrupt is called as interrupt latency. Now, second question is how fast does system respond to an interrupt? So this is what the question. Okay, that is how fast maybe the system. Okay, or let if rather than interrupt if we are there, so how fast we are to respond to the interrupt. Okay, so that is the question. For this you have different parameters, so there are number of parameters that will contribute to the interrupt latency. Okay, so these are some of the parameters, 1, 2, 3, 4 parameters are there that will contribute the complete interrupt latency. Okay, so the first parameter is the longest period of time during which that interrupt is disabled. Okay, for example, let right now we are in between the our online lecture, and somebody have disturbed me. Okay, right now, if somebody comes to me, so what is my response? Okay, so that response is nothing but the interrupt latency. Now I have to find out what are the different parameters that will contribute to that interrupt latency. Okay, so the first parameter, whenever any person come to me, okay, he will request me, okay, my service. So now I have the choice whether I have to give the service to that person instantly, or I have to say wait for 5 minutes. I will complete my topic and then I will give the service. Okay. So now this is the first parameter, or the second way I can say that right now I'm busy in executing or delivering my lecture, and you have to wait for let 1 hour or 2 hours. Okay. So the first parameter is shows that I have disabled the interrupt. That means if anybody comes or try to disturb me between 9:30 to 10:30, I cannot take the request of any person because the important work is going on. So I have disabled myself. That is, I have disabled all the interrupts. Okay. So this is what the first parameter that will contribute to the interrupt latency. That is nothing but the longest period of time during which that interrupt is disabled. Okay. For example, someone has asked me the service at 9:35. Okay, but I have not given the service to that person. I will give the service to that person after only 10:30. So this is what the longest period of time during which that interrupt is disabled. I have disabled that interrupt for 1 hour. Okay, so this is the first parameter that will contribute to the interrupt latency. Now another parameter that contribute is the period of time it takes to execute any interrupt routine for interrupts that are of higher priority. Okay, that means right now delivering my lecture is having the highest priority. Okay, so how much time is required to deliver this highest priority task is of 1 hour. Okay, so this is what the period of time it takes to execute any interrupt routine for interrupts that are of higher priority. Okay, so this is called as the second parameter. Now the third parameter that will contribute to the interrupt latency is how long it takes for processor to stop what he is doing. Because processor, whenever the interrupt comes, your processor is busy in executing something. So how long it takes for the processor to stop what he is doing and do the necessary bookkeeping and start executing the instructions within the interrupt routine. Okay. So I will give the analogous example of if somebody comes to me right now. Okay. So I will not instantly stop my lecture. Rather than I will say that please wait for 5 minutes. I will finish my topic. Okay. And once this is finished, that means that I will complete my topic. I will take the attendance. Okay. And then I will give the service to that person. So this is called as the necessary bookkeeping. Okay. And after that, I will start executing the instructions within the interrupt service routine. That means after only that time, after 5 minutes, I will give the service to that person. So this is also the time required to respond to the interrupt, because that person is treated as an interrupt now. Okay, I cannot give him instant service. Rather than he has to wait for 5 minutes till I finish my topic, I will take a attendance. So these are called as a necessary bookkeeping in terms of your microprocessor, what is the necessary bookkeeping in terms of microprocessor? So necessary bookkeeping is nothing but whenever interrupt comes, I have told that the procedure is to shift the control of the CPU from the main task code to the ISR. Okay, but you cannot do directly this particular process, because whenever you have to jump from the main task code to the ISR, you have to copy all the content of your registers onto the stack memory. So now this is the first bookkeeping that is done by your microprocessor, that is called as a saving the context. That means we have to save the contents of all the register onto the stack memory. Otherwise, we will lose the contents of that register whenever we do some calculation in the ISR. Okay. So this is one kind of bookkeeping. I hope you have understood this. Okay. And last one is how long it takes the interrupt service routine to save the context and then do enough work that what it has accomplished count as a response. Okay, so that is what I have just explained to you. That is how long it takes the interrupt service routine to save the context of all the registers onto the stack memory, and after that it will do enough work that what it has accomplished as a response. Okay, that means all these four parameters, okay, will nothing but the interrupt latency, or these four parameters will contribute as an interrupt latency. Okay, so whenever any interrupt comes to your CPU, it requires some time to respond to that interrupt. Okay, and what is that time, and on which parameter that time is dependent? So this is what the answer. So these four parameters are the responsible for the response to an interrupt. Okay, so this is very important. All these details or all these parameters are internal parameters. Okay, but you should know that. Okay. It requires maybe few milliseconds or microseconds. This response time is very less. Okay, not in seconds also. It is in milliseconds or microseconds. So now if we have this problem, okay, that is interrupt latency. For example, if the interrupt latency is higher, then your microprocessor has to require more time to respond to the interrupt. Okay, so how to deal with this problem? So to deal with this problem, we have two solutions. Okay, so first solution is make your interrupt service routine short. Okay, and as a standard case, your ISRs are always short. Okay, that means the code written in the ISR, that is very short. Okay, this is what the solution, and this is implemented by everywhere in the industry also. Another solution to deal with this interrupt latency problem is disabling the interrupts for only short period of time. Okay, means for example, I have given the analogous example that if any person comes to me at 9:35, so I will not give the service to that person. Okay, it has to wait for 10:30. So that person or that interrupt has to wait for 1 hour. Okay, which is not good thing, because why interrupt comes? Because interrupt comes because they have some very important work to execute, and if I make that person or interrupt wait for 1 hour, then there is no meaning of interrupt itself. Okay, so the solution is very simple. I will start my lecture. Okay, and maybe after 15 minutes I will give the service that is to that interrupt. Okay, so in this, that interrupt has to wait only 10 to 15 minutes. So this is what the solution that implemented in a microprocessor and controller also. That is, do not disable your interrupt for longer periods. Okay, just disable your interrupt for only short period of times. Okay, so that is very important. So these are the two solutions to avoid the interrupt latency. Okay, I hope you have understood, all of you. Okay. Interrupt latency is very simple. What is interrupt latency? It is the amount of time the microprocessor required to respond to an interrupt. Okay, so this is called as interrupt latency, but this is not as simple as we've seen. Okay, because this interrupt latency having many contributors. Okay, and those contributors we have just discussed here. That is 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 parameters we have seen. Okay. Now, if this is the problem, now what is the problem? That is, if the interrupt latency is higher. Interrupt latency is higher means if that person or that interrupt has to wait for a longer time, okay, then it is not good thing for your system also. Okay. So how to deal with this problem that we have seen by using the two solutions, that is by making the interrupt service routine short and disabling your interrupts for only short period of time. Okay. So in the exam also there may comes question on both of this topic. Okay, MCQs. I hope you have understood. Okay. Just give me the confirmation whether you have understood or not in the chat box. Yes, no, or whether I should repeat the topic. Okay, from Deshmukh I have received only yes. What about other people's? They have not understood. If you understood, okay, try to give the response also. Okay, I feel very happy. Okay. Okay, so this will over my the topic that is interrupts, the shared data, the harder shared data problem, atomic section, then critical section, interrupt latency, different parameters that contribute to the interrupt latency, and the solution for the interrupt latency. So this is over. Now we go to the next topic. Now the next topic is very interesting, and also it is actually simple, okay, compared to the previous one. So if you understood the previous concept, this topic is really simple. Okay. Now before we start, again I will ask whether it is visible. Is it visible? Kakade? Deshmukh, is it visible? All?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the next topic is scheduling algorithm. It is very simple. Just see. Real-time scheduling algorithms. That is only the change. You might have studied all these algorithms in system programming and operating system also. Out of this, there are two main types of scheduling algorithms. One is called as a non-preemptive scheduling algorithm, and second is called as a preemptive type of scheduling algorithm. Okay. So in the previous lecture also, I have told the basic types of scheduling algorithm for embedded system, that is preemptive and non-preemptive type of scheduling. Okay. So can anybody will tell me the difference between preemptive and non-preemptive scheduling? Hello, Deshmukh. Can you tell me the difference? What is non-preemptive scheduling? Okay, no problem. I will just repeat that. Okay, so there are different types of scheduling algorithms. I will just explain you. So the first scheduling algorithm is called as a non-preemptive type of scheduling. Second scheduling algorithm is called as a preemptive scheduling algorithm. The next scheduling algorithm is called as a first come first serve, or also called as a first in first out scheduling algorithm. Next scheduling algorithm is last come first serve or last in first out. Okay. The next scheduling algorithm is called as a shortage of first. Okay. Then there is a priority based scheduling algorithm. So these are the different scheduling algorithms that we have to study in this lecture. Okay. But before we go to this scheduling algorithms, I want to finish, or I want to just revise that is what do you mean by non-preemptive and preemptive type of scheduling. Okay. So I will just close this. Now there are two basic types of RTOS scheduling algorithm. One is called as a preemptive RTOS, and second is called as a non-preemptive RTOS. Okay. So what is preemptive type of RTOS? Those who have not attended the previous lectures, I will just explain. So non-preemptive type of scheduling, in which let you have the scenario that we have two tasks. Okay, one is called as a low priority task, and that there is another is a high priority task. And as we have seen in RTOS, your RTOS or that CPU will always execute the low priority task. Okay, so this particular figure shows that your CPU is always busy in executing the low priority task. Okay, and now whenever there is an higher priority task that comes into the ready queue of your CPU, it has to take the decision whether it has to continue with a low priority task or with a high priority task. Now in this case, if the scheduling algorithm is non-preemptive type of scheduling algorithm, so that time, rather than going for a high priority task, it will continue with a low priority task. Okay, that means whatever the task in hand, it will first complete that task, and only after completion of the low priority task, it will release the CPU so that your high priority task will execute its particular work. Okay, but if you've seen in this case, if high priority task has to wait till the low priority task has to complete its work, then there is no any meaning of having the priority, okay, greater than low task. Okay, so we move to the next type of scheduling algorithm called as a preemptive type of scheduling algorithm. Here your higher priority task has the more importance than the low priority task. Okay, so what happens with a non-priority task, that I will just explain. So non-preemptive RTOS will only take the microprocessor away from the lower priority task when that task blocks. Okay, that means if your RTOS or microprocessor will continue with a low priority task, okay, it will first complete the low priority task, and only then it will give the control to the high priority task. Okay, but if you use the preemptive type of RTOS, okay, so the next type is the preemptive type of RTOS. So here, if you observe, the low priority task is started by the RTOS initially. Okay, but whenever high priority task will give the interrupt to the microprocessor, so microprocessor will preempt the low priority task, okay, and will shift the control to the high priority task. Okay, it will first complete the high priority task, and only then it will shift its control to the low priority task. So this is what the advantage of using the preemptive type of scheduling. Here the high priority task is always given the importance, okay, rather than all other low priority tasks. So preemptive type of scheduling is widely used in RTOS or in real-time operating systems. Okay, now this is what the basic difference between the desktop OS and the RTOS. I think it is okay. Is it okay? Because I have already spent 2 hours on the task transition diagram, different tasks, okay, and types of RTOS kernel. Is it okay? Is it okay or not? So that I will have to continue. So preemptive type of scheduling and non-preemptive type of scheduling. These are the two main scheduling algorithms that are used in RTOS. Okay. Now there are many sub algorithms. Okay. So I will stop the sharing. Okay, so I will continue with this PPT. So just see here, the scheduling algorithms are just divided into 2 parts. Just see, that is in non-preemptive scheduling, you have first come first serve, last come first serve, shortage job first, and priority based. And also there is a preemptive type of scheduling is also there. Okay. So in preemptive scheduling algorithm, you have 3 types. One is a SJF, that is shortage job first, round robin, and priority based scheduling. Okay. So that's why I have just revised the non-preemptive and preemptive type of scheduling. Okay, so always remember these two. That is very important in terms of your exam, in terms of your orals, okay, in terms of your careers. So we will see these scheduling algorithms one by one. Okay. So the first scheduling algorithm is already we have over. That is preemptive type of scheduling, and no, second is also we have over, that is non-preemptive type of scheduling. Okay. So what is preemptive and non-preemptive type of scheduling? Okay. So again, I will explain in this slide also. So what is non-preemptive type of scheduling is nothing but once CPU is allotted to a particular process, it holds still it is completed, or still it is terminated, okay, or still it will block itself to wait for in out, or still it will request some OS service. Okay. So in non-preemptive scheduling, your CPU will continue with the original task only. Okay. And it will continue still it will finish that task. Until it will finish that task, it will not going to release the CPU to another task. So that is called as a non-preemptive type of scheduling. Second type is a preemptive scheduling. So what is preemptive type of scheduling? So in this, currently running process may be interrupted. Okay, that is, for example, RTOS is busy in executing the low priority task, and if there is an interrupt from high priority task, so this currently a running low priority process or task may be interrupted and moved to the ready state by the OS. Okay, so do not get confused between the task and the process. Okay, we can use basically task is used in RTOS and process is used in system programming and operating system subject. Okay, but there is no any meaning of getting confused in between process and task. Okay, so what happens with the preemptive type of scheduling? Whenever any low priority task is in running state, and if it is interrupted by an interrupt because of high priority task, so RTOS will switch from the low priority task, okay, and it will move that low priority task to the ready to run state. Okay, we have seen there are three types of states of the task. One is a running state, ready to run state, and the block state. Okay, at any time your CPU will begin executing any task in a running state, and all other tasks either in a ready to run state or that are get blocked. Okay, so here Windows 95 introduced preemptive type of scheduling. Okay, and used in all subsequent versions of Windows. So you should know that in desktop also you have these kinds of options. Okay, but don't worry about the desktop. Just concentrate on the RTOS only. I think it is clear. What is non-preemptive? What is preemptive? Preemptive means whatever the important task is there. Okay, so that task is executed first, and only after that non-important tasks are getting executed. Okay. Now this is the second type. So first we have what is non-preemptive type of scheduling. Second we have that is what is preemptive type of scheduling. Now next third scheduling algorithm is first come first serve, called as a FCFS or first in first out scheduling. So it's very simple. Just I even don't need to explain you people also. Okay, that is we have 4 or 5 persons, and they are going to get some service. Okay, and we know that in most of the management, okay, we know that we have the first come first serve kind of scheduling. Okay, that is that we have that 4 tasks. Okay, so out of that 4 tasks or 4 processes, which process will comes first will get the control of the CPU. Okay, so that is what simple. Okay, I have 4 processes or 4 tasks. The process or task which comes first to the CPU, the CPU will execute that task. Okay, so that is called as the first come first serve schedule. So so this scheduling algorithm is very simple. Okay, to implement. Okay, this is what the advantage is. So there is a question that is what are the different advantages of first source scheduling algorithm. So this is the first advantage, that this scheduling algorithm is very simple to implement. Okay, but it will not suited for most applications because it is difficult to estimate the amount of time a task has to wait being executed. Okay, that means the first advantage is it is very simple to implement, but the disadvantage is that it is very difficult to estimate the amount of time each task has to wait for being executed. Okay, because we have the four-person or four tasks. Okay, let P1, P2, P3, and P4. These are the four tasks. Okay, let first a task that is come to your CPU, and CPU is busy in executing the first task. Okay, so in this case, how much time is required to execute the last task, for example P4 or T4? So this is very difficult. Okay, because once it will finish the first process, okay, then there's another process, second, T2, T3, and only after that it is going to execute the T4. Okay, so the last task has to wait for a longer period of time. So that is the disadvantage. Now this is good algorithm for an embedded system to perform few small tasks, all with small execution time. Okay. Now this is also very important. That is, what is the selection criteria of your scheduling algorithm? So this is one of the selection criteria of the first come first serve algorithm. That is, if your tasks are small with all small execution time. For example, we have the four tasks, and each task requires like 5 to 10 seconds to finish its work. So in this case, this algorithm is the suitable choice. Okay, and it can give you the correct output because your all the tasks has not to wait for a longer time. Okay, so this is the reason. So if your number of tasks are small, that means I have only 3 to 4 tasks. Okay, and if these 3 to 4 tasks having a small execution time, that means each task will be executed in let 5 to 10 seconds. In this scenario, you can go with a first come first serve type of scheduling. But if I have a more number of tasks, for example, that 100 to 1000 tasks are there. Okay, now in this case, do not use first come first serve scheduling algorithm. Okay, so this is what told in the next statement. That is, if there is no time criticality and the number of tasks is small, this algorithm can be implemented. This algorithm can be used. Okay, that means if you have some critical execution of task, okay, so in this case, do not use this type of scheduling algorithms. You have to use this scheduling algorithm only when the number of tasks are small. That means very few in numbers. So this is what the criteria of selection of this particular first come first serve algorithm. I hope you have understood this. Okay. Just give the confirmation. Is it understood? Saili Kutwa?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I will ask anybody randomly. Okay, okay. Be alert. Okay, so again I will repeat it. First come first. So here the first task which come to the CPU will get the service. Okay, quite clear. Now it having the advantage that it is simple to implement. Okay, but it having the disadvantage that it is very difficult to estimate the amount of time each task has to wait for being executed. Okay, so that is the problem only. Then when to use this algorithm? So whenever the number of tasks are small and also their execution time is also less, In this scenario, you can use the first come first serve algorithm. Also, if there is no any time critical events that are involved in this algorithm, then also you can use this algorithm. Okay. Now, next drawback of this first come first algorithm is this algorithm will lead to poor utilization of CPU. Okay. So, what do you mean by the utilization of CPU? Okay. That means let my CPU is able to handle 1000 tasks. Okay, at a time. Okay, but you have supplied only one task to your CPU. Now this is nothing but the underutilization of your CPU. Okay, that means your resource has the more capability, but you are not going to extract the capability of that particular resource. So this is called as the underutilization or poor utilization of CPU. Okay, are you getting or not? So quite simple. That is the capability of your CPU. The capability of your CPU is to handle the 1000 tasks at a time, but you are executing only one or single task at a time. That means you are underestimating the CPU power. So if you use this first come first serve type of scheduling algorithm, so this algorithm will leads to the poor utilization of the CPU. This is the drawback. Second drawback is the average time or the average waiting time is not minimal for XCFS scheduling algorithm. Okay, average waiting time means the total waiting time of your all the tasks. Okay, that means it may happen that each task has to wait for like 1 hour or 2 hour or 3 hours. Okay, so this is not minimum. Minimal means minimum. It is very high. That is the last task which is going to execute has to wait for a longer time. That is the disadvantage of your FCFS. One more disadvantage is that short job suffers penalty. What do you mean by this? Short job suffer penalty. That means the tasks which are very which require very less time for the execution, they have to wait for a longer time. For example, I have 4 tasks: T1, T2, T3, and T4. Okay, and my last task T4 has required only 1 second for the execution. Okay, but if you use FCFS, it may happen that your task 1, 2, and 3 will execute first, which requires the more time, maybe like 10 or 20 seconds, and your last task, which requires only 1 second, has to wait for a longer time. Still, T1, T2, and T3 will execute. Only then your T4 will be executed. So this is called as short job suffer penalty. Okay, that means your task or process which requires a small execution time, they have to wait for a more time. Okay, so that is called as a short job suffers penalty. I think this is understandable. Okay, first come first serve, and there's a second type of algorithm called as a last come first serve. Okay, which work in a somewhat similar way, that is first in first out. So this is last in first out. Okay, so I don't need to explain this. That is the last person or task which comes will get the CPU or service first. That is called as the last come first serve. Okay. So now we have seen 4 types of scheduling algorithm: preemptive, non-preemptive, then first come first serve, then last come first serve. Now the next 5th type of scheduling algorithm is called as shortest job first scheduling algorithm. Okay. Now what is shortest job first scheduling algorithm? Okay, I will explain with the help of this diagram. Just see. Now the simple example is taken. I have 4 tasks or 4 process: P1, yes, P1, P2, P3, and P4. So I have 4 processes: P1, P2, P3, and P4. And in this table, I have given a execution time required to complete that particular task. For example, process P1 is required only 0 seconds to complete its task. P4 requires 10 seconds to complete its particular task or process. Process P3 required 16 seconds to complete itself, and process P2 required 23 seconds to complete itself. Okay, that means here I have shown the 4 processes and the total execution time required for this each process. Okay, now what is done in shortage job first scheduling algorithm? The task that will have the minimum time to be executed will be given the priority. Okay, that means now I have 4 tasks. Out of these 4 tasks, which task is selected by the CPU? So if you use shortage of first type of scheduling, the CPU will select the task or the process which requires the minimum execution time. So can anybody tell me, out of these 4 tasks, which task or which process requires the minimum execution time? Anybody? Deshmukh? Out of these 4 tasks, P1 or process, P1, P2, P3, P4, which task requires the minimum execution time? Kakre? It's a quite simple question. Kumbar? Okay, I have got from Barani. It's a process P1. From Shali Barani has given the answer. It's a correct one. Process P1. Okay, so here it is clearly visible that process P1 requires 0 seconds. Okay, that means process P1 have a very less or small execution time. Now another small execution time is shown by the process P4. So P4 requires only 10 seconds, P3 requires 16 seconds, and P2 requires 23 seconds. Okay, so if you use shortage of first type of scheduling algorithm, the microprocessor will execute your processes in the sequence of SC. CPU will first select the process P1, which requires only 0 seconds. Then it will complete the process P1. Then it will see that out of P2, P3, and P4, now P4 have the less execution time. Only 10 seconds will be required for P4. So P4 will be selected secondly. Then out of P2 and P3, now P3 having less execution time of 16 seconds. So third process selected by CPU will be the P3, and you have the last process that will be P2, which requires the most of the time, that is the 23 seconds. So shortage of first scheduling algorithm will work on a very simple principle that it will schedule the execution of your task such that the process which requires the less or small execution time, it will select that process first. Okay, and then accordingly the same principle it will select the next task. Okay, so shortage of first scheduling algorithm, I just told that the task will take the minimum time to be executed will be given the priority. Out of these 4 tasks, P1 having the small or minimum execution time, so that will be selected first. Then P2 having the second smallest execution time. Then P3 having the third smallest execution time, and P4 having the last execution priority. So this is how to select the process or task if you use the shortage job first. Now this approach satisfies the maximum number of tasks, but some tasks may wait forever. Okay, that means if you observe here, the last task is P2 task, which requires the 23 seconds to execute. Okay, so this particular task has to wait for a very longer time. Okay, and some situations, the last task has to wait forever also. Okay, they are not going to execute also. That may happen. So that is the disadvantage with the shortage job. So in SGF, the process with the shortest estimated runtime is scheduled first, followed by the next process, and so on. Okay, so it's quite simple. Shortage of first algorithm means just estimate the execution time of all the processes, and the process which requires the less time, you select that process first. Okay, and follow the same principle for the next processes also. Okay, is it fine? Is it understandable? Are you getting or not? Just give me the some confirmation in the chat box. I have got one. Okay. Second, Deshmukh, Patole. What about others? Deshmukh, Kakade, Kutwal, Kumbar. Are you getting or not? If you are getting, confirm. If you are not, then also you should send something in the chat box. Okay, so it's very simple algorithm. You have to just understand the principle, and then you will understand the scheduling algorithms also. Okay, shortage job means you have number of tasks or processes. You estimate the execution time of all the processes or tasks, and the task or the process which requires the smallest execution time, you select that task first. Same principle is applied to the in the second step, in the third step, in the fourth steps. Okay, so that is very much simple. It having some advantages and also the disadvantages. We have the last one. I will just use this. Last scheduling algorithm is a priority-based scheduling. Okay, so what is priority-based scheduling? It's again very simple. I have four tasks. Okay, I will take the same example. I have four tasks: P1, P2, P3, P4. Okay, and let my priority to this task is P1 having the highest priority, then P2, then P3, and then P4. Okay, so now out of these four tasks, your CPU will first take the uh, task or the process which having the higher priority. That is, it will first take the P1, then take the P2, and then take the P3, and then it will take the P4. So this is what the sequence followed by the your scheduler if you use a priority based schedule. Okay. Uh, so